In this final lesson, let's look at how we can create a nice final render using Final Gather. So if we take a look at the render that we have so far with our HDR and our plane, go ahead and just render that up. Now this is going to be using the HDR simply as reflection, but what we want to do is actually use it to light our scene. Right now we're just using kind of the default light, and we're using that HDR as sort of a reflection for the pieces in our scene, but what we want to do is use it to light using Final Gather. So to turn that on, we're just going to our render settings and just open those up, and let's go into Metal Ray and turn on Final Gather. Let's go into the Common tab and turn off our default light. Alright, now we can change some Final Gathering settings here. So we've got our accuracy set to 100. Okay, we've got our point density set to 1. Let's go ahead and bump that up to maybe 1.2. That'll create a few more Final Gather points from which we can compute the lighting. And our point interpolation, we can bump that up to maybe 40 or 50, which will kind of blur the Final Gather result. It'll give you a little bit less of a blotchy image, but you may lose a little bit of a fine detail. So as the Final Gather as a whole is sort of beyond the scope of this training. It's not really rendering training. So if you want to learn more about Final Gather, feel free to take a look at Mental Ray Workflow's Final Gather on the website. You'll be able to find it. Just do a search, go under Maya rendering, and you'll be able to find what you need. And you've got a lot of information there on Final Gather, as well as a whole host of other rendering topics. So anyway, go ahead and set that, and I'll go ahead and set my filter to, I think 2 will help to reduce some of the spottiness that we get. So then we've got this turned on, and we've got our default light turned off. Let's go ahead and now take a look at what that's going to look like. So we'll go ahead and now do a render. So what Final Gather is going to do is illuminate our vehicle using the environment. So we have the floor, we have an HDRI dome with an image simulating a studio lighting setup with light panels, and all of that information is being used to simulate light bouncing around rather than coming from several or 1 or 2 direct light sources. We've got light bouncing around, and it creates this nice soft look that you're seeing here in our render. You can see how it's going through a couple of different passes to achieve that render. So it gives you a little bit more of a realistic look. It simulates that light bouncing around, which is what we want. Now as this renders up, you can see it kind of goes through that initial pass, and you can also see the progress going on down here at on the progress bar. And now as it renders up, we can start to take a look at some of the things that we might want to modify here on our model, so we can get a better look at the materials and how those are interacting with that Final Gather. I'm looking at those wheels, and it looks like we may want to brighten up that red a bit. So we can take the material for those wheels and brighten that up. We also might want to brighten up the body if you want to, depending on what color you're going to go for. But I think definitely the wheels is something that we want to brighten up the red to give it a nice pop there. So we'll go ahead and open that up, and I'll just take the base color up to a brighter red, and also the lit color up a bit. And I think that's good. So we'll go ahead and close that, and I'm going to do a render, and then I'll go ahead and pause this time on the render. And there we go. And we're back, and those wheels I think look a lot better. You could even stand to brighten those up, I think, even a little bit more. Okay, so it's really looks pretty good compared to kind of what we started with, the boxy shape. So we looked at how we could use thumbnails to sketch out our ideas, some of the different automotive terms and design sort of pieces that we can put together. We looked at using 3D pre-visualization to kind of block out shapes, and we used kind of box modeling. So really this started from a single piece of geometry, a box basically, and we've continued to add resolution and cut it apart and do different things to it to actually create this vehicle that we have. So it's really neat to be able to take something like that all the way through to the end. Now again, as I always say, feel free to, if you've made changes or gone in your own way, go ahead and post those online. We'd love to see those. This brings us to the conclusion of creating concept vehicles in Maya. Over the course of the last several hours, we've designed and built a concept car from scratch. We started by taking a look at the thumbnail and 3D pre-visualization process in designing the vehicle. We then used a variety of polygonal techniques to build up the vehicle from a low-resolution model to a final high-resolution version. We added fine detail in strategic locations to help sell the car as a believable vehicle. In addition to the modeling, we also looked at a variety of texturing and shading methods in order to finish out the car. So to continue your education, I'd encourage you to check out the hundreds of free tutorials we offer online at digitaltutors.com. Check back often as we're always adding new lessons daily. Also on the website, you'll find additional modeling, texturing, and rendering training that directly complement the one you've just viewed, as well as an entire library of training products covering the different aspects of 3D production that are currently being used by students, schools, professionals, and studios around the world.